Anybody else?
Invisible.
Invisible. Do you want to expand a little bit?
Sometimes you're busy doing things and putting out fires before people even realize there's a fire.
Uh-huh.
And it's necessary what you're doing and very important. But it gets exhausting.
Right. Exhausting, tiring. And you lose yourself in the process. You feel invisible. So,
Sometimes lonely.
lonely.
You want to make plans,
Yeah.
and you can't.
You're isolated. You slowly become isolated with a caregiving task, right? Anything else? No? Okay.
Doing a good
So-
deed. Doing a good deed.
Doing a good, so you are thinking of the positive side, and this is typical that really most people, the most kind of, the things that stand out the most are the hardship, but there's also a positive side to caregiving, right? And I'm going to expand a little bit on those feelings. But let's start with what you were talking about, which is sadness, grief, anger, and frustration. And really that there is a whole complexity of feeling that comes along with caregiving, that one single person in the span of 5 minutes can feel all of these feelings that you're describing. You're already fatigued, and now another crisis piles up, and you feel your frustration coming up, but then a second later you feel shame maybe or guilt about getting angry because it's nobody's fault that this is happening, and then 2 minutes later you're overcome by grief because Yom Tov is coming and it's not going to be what it used to be, right? And so there is such a complexity of feeling that comes with this task, and it's important to keep in mind that it's all normal and it's all what most people feel. I want to focus a little bit on guilt and shame because I feel that these are feelings that are a little bit, I mean, the other stuff that you described is inevitable. Shame and guilt are a little bit more something that we do have some degree of control over. And the way I like to, let's start with shame. People feel ashamed when they start feeling conflicted about the task of caregiving, because in their mind they should be altruistic and they should be omnipotent and they should be able to handle it and they should do it with a great big smile. And the reality is that they're also feeling angry, even with a person who's sick and not well. They're feeling frustrated. They're feeling ambivalent about what's ahead of them. They're feeling overwhelmed because their plate is already full. And then on top of all of this, they're feeling ashamed for feeling this way. So I want to kind of just direct your attention to that additional feeling that you're putting on yourself and to give you permission to take it off, because it's a normal part of the process to feel ambivalence, and everybody feels it. Nobody's an angel who's just kind of flying around and, I mean, the reality is that it's an overwhelming situation. It's an added stress that you weren't anticipating, and most people feel ambivalent, and most people have a complex feeling towards this task. And there's nothing to be ashamed of. This is normal. This is how most people feel. Guilt is another feeling that I think adds a lot of sleepless nights and adds a lot of depression and sadness and anxiety. And it's not necessary. I think of it as a cul-de-sac. It's the kind of street that you have to make a U-turn because it's not going anywhere. Every feeling has a function, right? Hashem gave us these feelings, they have a function. The function of guilt, and it's an important function, is to kind of, flicker a red light and make us stop and examine what we're doing. So, I didn't get up on the bus and give my seat to an old lady, so I stop and I think about it because I'm feeling guilty that I didn't do it. And the purpose of me thinking about it is, if I can fix it, then I can still have a chance and get up and give her the seat, or I can decide that I'm going to do a better job next time. And so it's about, kind of calibrating our moral compass and examining what we're doing. After we do that, the purpose of guilt is done. It's finished. So we use our guilt to examine what we're doing and to pay attention and see if there's something we can do better or differently. If there is something we can do better or differently next time, we will. We take it upon ourselves to do a better, whatever it is, to fix whatever needs to be fixed. And if there's nothing more that we can do, then we take that guilt off our shoulders and we put it aside, because it's really a lot of wasted energy that you could use in much better ways, including caring for yourself and caring for others better. The last thing I want to say about feelings is that a lot of the time people feel that if they have negative feelings, even being angry with a person who you're caring for, right? If you have angry feelings, frustrated feelings, irritated kind of behaviors, then that takes away from what you are doing good. And it's not true, okay? So whatever you're doing, they don't cancel each other out. I mean, clearly, if you care for another and you do it in a way that's humiliating for them, that takes away. But that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about when you do the best you can, and you also feel frustrated and tired and fatigued and wish that you could go on vacation, and that doesn't take away from what you are doing for that person. And a lot of the times the feeling is, yeah, but I should be doing it, with a bigger smile and with more energy. You're doing the best you can, and it doesn't take away from it, even if you're not doing it, to whatever standards you think you should be doing with. And then the last thing I wanted to add as far as emotions go is that there are some positive feelings that come along with caregiving, and some of them, may come up maybe for you later on when you look back and you have a sense of peace with yourself, a sense of I did the best I could, I have no regrets, I was there when I was needed. There's a sense of competence that you gain from caring for someone, knowing that you can go through a period that's difficult and stressful and you can come out the other side, maturing, feeling more mature, more accomplished, being grateful for being given the opportunity to be there for someone when they need you. Feeling a sense of pride, integrity, feeling a sense of, following in the steps of what your parents would have wanted you to do, or the values that you grew up with, and really being able to stand up to those values and feel that you are taking on whatever it is that you believe in and that you think is right. And also, I guess, with that goes also giving that role modeling to your children and feeling good about showing them how you are caring for your parents. This is supposed to be, by the way, for children of parents who are having an illness, but I'm assuming there's other types of relationships in the room, so it's going to be pretty general and apply to most types of relationships, but I'll just highlight a few things that are specific to parents and children, children taking care of their parents. I also wanted to mention that the format is that I'm going to speak for about 30 minutes, and then we'll try to have also some discussion for the last 15 minutes. That's how we're going to try to do it. But if you have questions about something I'm saying, feel free to let me know. So the next thing that I wanted to talk about are some of the internal tensions that people are living with day to day. So kind of the pulls and the kind of a push and pull that goes on inside of each one of us that doesn't always get to be talked about and shared with other people. The first pull that I want to talk about is the willingness to self-sacrifice versus I don't want to call it entitlement because there's a lot of negative associations with that, but what I mean by entitlement, it's sort of a sense for self-preservation, for taking care of yourself, for doing what you need to do for yourself. And there's going to be that tension, and it's going to be highlighted by a situation like this because resources are limited, and you're going to have to choose to take care of yourself versus to take care of a loved one. And so this conflict is going to be constant, and what we hope for is to have some kind of a balance because they're both important, right? The instinct for self-preservation is important for reasons that I mentioned before already, because you can only give so much, but you also need to take care of yourself. And I'm going to give some examples. So self-preservation might mean investing in your relationship with your spouse as you're taking care of your parent, investing in your own children, in your own nuclear family. It might mean taking care of yourself physically, like going to an exercise class or getting more sleep at night or getting a massage if your back is hurting, right? So those are all self-preservation, but they're not entitlement as in like you push somebody out of the line and you get in front of them. It's not that kind of entitlement. It's positive entitlement. It's a kosher entitlement. It's the kind of entitlement that means nurturing yourself, other relationships in your life that you are going to need in order to be able to survive this. Also, have to remember right, that the spouses that you're going through with this, you're going to have, you're going to live the rest of your life with them, your children. So even though you're attending to a crisis over here, there's also the rest of life that continues to go on. And so that sense of entitlement of taking care of your life is self-preservation for you in the long term, that you still need to kind of take care of the rest of your life, because you need to be able to step back into it when this crisis resolves eventually, or when you find some kind of sense of balance with it. And then obviously the other part of it is the self-sacrifice, that we want to be there for our parents, that we know that it's a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, that it has a beginning and an end, and that for a limited amount of time we're willing to put ourselves second and to prioritize the well-being of another person, and we feel strongly that it's the right thing to do, and we do it the best we can. So those are the two kind of poles that you want to think about. The next thing that I wanted to talk about is defining one's commitments. So, I don't know how many of you here are dealing with a crisis that's kind of imminent or acute happening right now, or whether it's been a long-term caring situation. But either way, we tend to kind of throw ourselves into situations and say, I'm going to, take her in and I'm going to do this and that. And it's really very useful to have a kind of time where you sit with yourself and you define for yourself what you actually think you want to do and you're able to do. And you want to take into consideration a few things, right? You want to take into consideration the nature of your relationship with this person. So for example, if you're a daughter taking care of an ailing father, there's going to be some limits just in terms of your relationship when it comes to physical care, to boundaries, to what you can do and cannot do, that you need to take into consideration. So it's very nice to say, yes, I'm going to come, I'm going to take my father to live with me, but you need to think about what limitations does that situation have, and what you can do and what you cannot do. So defining a commitment might be, I will make breakfast and do shopping and cooking, but when it comes to personal hygiene and other types of caregiving, that's where I am not able to step in, and we need to think about somebody else or some other arrangement to take care of that. So defining your commitments is really thinking about what you can and cannot do, what you think you're able to do without completely, wiping yourself out, basically. And also taking into consideration the nature of your relationship with that person, what's expected of you, your resources, financial. Are you going to lose your job as a result of doing this? Can you afford to lose your job as a result of doing it? So really looking at a big picture and not just making a rash, spontaneous decision in the moment, but really, and remembering that even if you did extend yourself and made a rash decision, you can always reevaluate, and you can always redefine your commitments and realize that maybe, you committed to A, B, and C, but you can only do A and B realistically, because you've had this experience now and you know what it means, and it's a lot already. When I talk about these commitments, if you are sort of in a family caregiving situation, then it's useful to have meetings with family members where different people are defining their commitments, and you can decide as a group who is going to do what, and you can have an open communication about, one sibling may have less resources and they can only contribute 10% of the burden of taking care, but to have that group commitment where people are committing and they're very clear as to what they're willing to do and how and when they're going to do it. You might want to have a calendar online, you may want to have an email or a text group, whatever it is, but where people are sort of sitting together and deciding who's going to do what.
Sorry to interrupt. If anybody came on the Brooklyn bus, the bus is leaving, so if you came on the bus is leaving. Sorry.
The bus is leaving. Okay.
It's a good title for a book.
Right, the bus is leaving. There's metaphorical meaning to that. We're gonna figure it out by the end of the session. So, all right. I also want to kind of highlight this tension between present and future. And what I mean by that is that it's useful to think of your needs in the present moment, as in, going to the gym, spending time with your kids, and how you might feel 2 or 3 years or 5 years down the road, thinking back at this period and kind of finding a balance between what you feel you need in the moment, but also kind of trying to think as best as you can, how are you going to look back at this period? Are you going to feel like, you did right, that you did whatever you could do? To have in mind your future self as well as your present self, just as an exercise, something to keep in mind, because perspective makes a big difference, right? And when we're immersed in a certain moment and we only see the present moment, it sometimes creates blind spots. Hope and fantasy versus what I would call, denial is a strong word, but maybe inattending to certain parts of reality. So we all have different temperaments. Some people thrive on seeing things through rosy glasses and not paying attention to the more difficult aspects of reality. And some people really like to know the details, even if it's hard. They like to know exactly, how the surgery went, what incision, every single detail. So this is a big continuum, right? From people who only see what they want to see, which is great sometimes, and from people who are very, very, they're just very in touch with reality to the point where it's very hard and it takes a toll. So I want to highlight the positives and the negatives with each one of these attitudes. What's useful about having rosy glasses is that it's easier to maintain your optimism. It's easier to kind of have hope for the future. It's easier to look for different options, and it's very useful sometimes. I'm thinking of a story of a person who was diagnosed with cancer, and they told him that it was a throat cancer, and they would have to operate and take out the vocal cords. He wouldn't be able to speak again. And him and the wife were very, very strongly against it. They felt that life wouldn't be worth living without his voice. So they went to a second opinion and a third opinion. And eventually they utilized a lot of resources, spent a lot of time, but they found somebody who was able to do the surgery, take out the entire cancer, and preserve the vocal cords. So what I'm saying is that hope is important, and when somebody says you're not going to be able to do this, and you say, no, I am going to be able to do this, I will walk again, I will speak again, that's amazing, and it's a useful tool, and it's really a blessing when you can have that attitude. At the same time, sometimes we tend to not attend to certain aspects of reality. We tend to not ask too many questions because we don't want to know the answer that we already kind of know. So what's going to happen when I get home and, my wife is incontinent and, or right now she has a catheter. How is that going to work when we're home, right? It's the kind of question that maybe some of us would rather not ask because the answer might not be lovely. And it might be hard, but the useful thing about being in touch with reality, even if it means a little bit more pessimism, is that you can prepare for it, right? And especially when we're talking about illnesses that have a trajectory, we know that things like Alzheimer's change over time. So when you ask a lot of questions and you're being given a certain trajectory, you know that for the first 6 months or a year, things will pretty much stay the same. But in a year or two, you might need help with taking father shopping or even outings out of the house that he won't be able to do on his own anymore. So you're able to prepare ahead of time when you're asking all these questions. What can I expect in a year from now? What can I expect in 2 years from now? What can I expect in the next 3 months? Whatever it is. So I'm talking about preparing practically speaking for those events, and I'm also talking about emotionally preparing oneself. So instead of it sort of coming out of nowhere as a huge, terrible shock, it can be something that you can slowly come to accept and work with and work your way around it and feel your way around it. So both of these have negative and positives, and you want to kind of use it with discretion. And also to keep in mind that different people cope differently. So in a family, you might have the kind of extreme optimistic person who says, no, don't listen to the doctors, statistics don't matter, this is, and that person sees it through those lenses. And then you have the person who needs to know all the details and all the gory little, and they will, they might get into terrible arguments because they see totally different things. And it's important to realize that this is how they're coping. This is how this one copes, this is how this one copes. They're both useful, they're both true. They're just different ways of approaching, and they're probably both valuable. Okay. Another way that I think people cope with, and that creates a kind of a tension, maybe a little bit, is in terms of feeling in control of the situation. A lot of the times, a way to feel in control is to create a predictable routine, especially with illnesses, with things that feel very out of control. We didn't ask for this, we didn't sign up. The least we can do is create a routine, create a kind of a seder, hayom, and go through it and check things off the list. You know, there's breakfast, there's this, there's that, and we kind of go through the motion, and every little task that get accomplished feels good. It feels like we're in control. It feels like things are going, okay, which is excellent. Again, there's a lot of merit to that because it creates, again, a sense of control and order. The thing that gets lost a little bit sometimes with that, or the danger with that, is that sometimes we can kind of shift into automat pilot and to start kind of going through the motions a little bit, in this automated way. We check A and B and C, and we go through the day, and we do this every day, and becomes such a routine that we lose the feeling for the human contact. We lose the feeling for the relationship that you have with that person, and that goes with spousal relationships, and it goes with children and parents relationship. That sometimes it's useful to step out of that caregiving role and just sit down and be human together again. Even if the person you're caring for has limited capacity, there's always, I hope and I believe, there's always a part of them that's still, alive and that you can get in touch with. Of course, it depends on what relationship you had with this person prior to when they got sick. So if you never had those kind of moments with them before, clearly it's going to be very hard to start having them now. But whatever your relationship was about, if you can kind of remember some of those human parts of it, even as you're going through these routines that you've created now as a result of the illness, that's a way to kind of balance that routine out a little bit. And by the way, yes, you probably could have new relationships even inside an old relationship, because people change, and someone who used to be very busy maybe now spends a lot of time at home. So you actually, for the first time, have time to sit down and have a conversation with them, which you wouldn't have been able to do any other time. So there's that also. Now, in terms of friction, I'm not going to talk much about it because we're going to run out of time. But if any one of you has something in mind in terms of how to deal with family members or the medical establishment and those types of communication, some doctors are better at communicating, some doctors not so much. It's useful to try to get as much information as you can, as I was saying before. So if you have any questions about that, we can come back to it. So I want to talk a little bit about coping strategies, and within that, about obstacles to utilizing support. And I'm going to start with the latter because I think it's very important. So we're here to take care of ourselves, and we realize that we're going to need some help, a lot of help, that we're going to need to take the time to have honest conversations with ourselves, but also really to get the practical and emotional support. And I'm talking about having people who will help you cook and shop and visit and spend time with a person. And I'm also talking about emotional support. So we're talking about frustration and feeling overwhelmed and feeling angry. And who are you going to talk with about all of this? And that, by the way, goes for the cared for person who also is having all of these feelings and doesn't necessarily feel that they can talk with the caregiver about it, because the caregiver is already burdened and it's already frustrated and they don't want to add to it. So getting as much support as you can is very important, and even more important is to use the support. And you might think, this is ridiculous, what's the problem? Actually, one of the main issues that I find with a lot of caregivers is that there is a lot of reticence to use support. Okay, so people feel very overwhelmed, very fatigued, and yet when a support or a kind of a help is available, a lot of the time they say, no, you know what, it's okay, I'll do it anyways, right? Or when there is, an opportunity to get an additional aid from the government or from what, no, I don't like having somebody in the house. No, I can't do that. Only I know how to prepare his favorite meal. Okay, so there's a lot of obstacles that we as caregivers create in the way of receiving and utilizing support. And I think it's important for each one of you to think what gets in the way of using more support that's available. I have some ideas that I'm going to share with you, and then we can open it up and you can tell me if you think of anything else. The first obstacle to utilizing support is knowledge. You don't always know what's available out there. So, now with the internet, it's really so much easier to get information about government aids. Even, a place like Achiezer, who has so much resources, and they can tell you who can give you what, and grants, and nurses, and support groups online. I gave out a resource sheet as well. Books, self-help books. I mean, all kinds of things that are out there to help you care for yourself. You need to reach out for it. It's not always right in front of you, so you need to seek, and I know that you don't have the time for it, but when you do find a few minutes, or even just talking with other people and saying, I'm caring for my mother, they might know somebody, they might know something you don't know, they might know of a group, whatever it is, it's important to get as much knowledge as you can. It's not me, right? Okay. Next one is fear of appearing as shirking one's responsibilities. So you don't... Does that mean?